8% because that's where the market would be. And but the other major problem when the Fed gets involved in artificially lower interest rates, it causes what we call malinvestment. People do things they shouldn't be doing. Even if you don't see the prices rising, they invest because they think there's been a lot of savings. They might build too many houses or build too many casinos down in Las Vegas and all the different things. So this is the mischief of the Federal Reserve, and eventually it'll be dealt with. This is not new. Destruction of money has been around for a long time, and inevitably when they finally destroy the currency, they always have to go back to something that people know about and they trust, and they go back just as the founders went back. They had runaway inflation with the continental dollar. They put in the Constitution, only gold and silver can be legal tender. And they also said you could not emit bills of credit, which is paper money. And they also said, we give you no authority to establish a central bank. Now, immediately there was a great debate between Jefferson and Hamilton, and in the early years, of course, they kept getting rid of the national bank, but we've been suffering with this for the last, the last 100 years. So I'm hoping on the 100th anniversary that we have a bill that we can pass that says on the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve, we're going to have a bill that's going to repeal the Federal Reserve Act.
And the Fed, 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 and the Fed.
The other major flaw with a monetary system like this, it enables governments to grow in a sinister manner. Jefferson didn't want to even be able to borrow money, but he didn't win that fight. But if they taxed us for everything that they do, and we had to send them a check every month, believe me, this would all end rather quickly because the people would rebel. Matter of fact, just to make that point, I introduced a bill one time to repeal withholding taxes. Why should the businessman be a slave and collect these papers and fill out all these forms? The real benefit would be that people would know how much they're paying for the government, and there would be a quick rebellion that would get us back on track again. But because the borrowing can become noticeable, if you didn't have the Fed to monetize debt, the borrowing would push interest rates up, and then the Congress would have to quit spending because the more they spent, the higher the interest rates would go up. But we don't have that check. And so we have the Federal Reserve that just prints the money when the federal government needs the money. So it does hide things, and the victims are sometimes unknown. They're not known immediately, and they can get away with that until the end point when the currency is destroyed. But in the meantime, you might have decades of this. We went off the gold standard completely in 1971. These last 40 years have been nothing but a big bubble being formed. But during that time, just think of what has grown. The entitlement system and the warfare system. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, it's alive and well, and they're spending money. And the thing that really, even though I've studied this for a long time in Congress, and I know how so many of you feel, they're living with their head in the sand. They're in oblivion in Washington. They don't even, if they thought that the problem was 1/10 as serious as I think that it is, they would quit spending. That's what they should do. But the whole system fed on itself. The entitlement system is alive and well. Politicians did quite well by just promising whatever the people wanted. We could borrow, spend. We're a wealthy nation, and we were the wealthiest nation ever because we were the freest nation. Of course, today we're not the freest nation, and we're not the richest nation anymore. But the entitlement system got way off base because entitlement sounds like a good word. We would like to say we're entitled to our right to our life and to our liberties, but we're not entitled to somebody else's money. Entitlements have become what people, through the politician, demand or want or insist on, and the politicians accommodate, and they become entitlements. And literally, I imagine more than 50% of the people in this country still think that an entitlement is a right, but an entitlement isn't a right. We get our lives and our liberty from our Creator. We get it in a natural way. We don't get it from the government, but if we have a right to our life and our liberties, we ought to have a right to keep the fruits of our labor. Which of course means there would be no income tax if you could live with that. A lot of people will challenge me, of course, because I want to start off the first year with a token cut of $1 trillion. Quite frequently, the questions are very sincere because they've studied only Keynesian economics. And I say, well, what will happen? We're in a recession. What would happen if the government quit spending $1 trillion? I said, well, think of it this way. It isn't so much that the government's the fact that the government's quitting spending $1 trillion. It would be that the government would quit spending it and the people would spend $1 trillion. And that's what would happen, and that would be much better. I, quite frankly, am very frank about what I think the nature and the philosophy of a president ought to be. The president shouldn't be running the economy. The president doesn't know what to do. The Congress doesn't know what to do. Only the people know what to do on how to run the economy. Say that we can get out of this mess by snapping our fingers and everything will be perfect, but I know what we're doing is wrong and it's prolonging the agony, and it's going to be worse than our depression if we don't change our ways. But what we need to do, though, is not scare people with what the correction is all about. Because I don't think we should propose our viewpoints by saying, well, I have the problems as long as you're willing to sacrifice. But why would it be that if I came along and talked to the businessman and to you in this audience and say, look, what I want to do is I want to deregulate you. I don't want the federal coming down in your states and having mandates. I don't think that's a sacrifice to have less regulations from the federal government. Would it be a sacrifice to you if you could trust the currency? How many here now would say, well, I'm saving for my children's education. I'm going to buy a 20-year bond and make 0.5% or 0.25%, and I know I'll have the purchasing power in 20 years. Nobody believes that. So what if you had sound money and you could save money and you could be confident that you can take care of your future? What else? Not only that, the prices of education would come down. But why would it be a sacrifice to us if you didn't have any income tax? That doesn't sound like a sacrifice to me. I would think this would be wonderful. We have to change, the people have to change their attitude about what the role of government ought to be. And that is important because no matter how many people you have in Washington, they will reflect the demands of the people. So if the people still say entitlements are rights and we want to steal money from one group and you give it to us, it's not going to work. So we have to change the people's attitude about the role of government. But there's another area that we have to at least address, and I believe we have to change to get this correction over with. And that has to do with what we're doing overseas. We're spending, the DOD budget's not this big, but believe me, there are a lot of other budgets that are involved in what we're doing overseas. The intervention, the State Department, the CIA, our troops, and taking care of the wounded and all, it's costing us over $1 trillion. Our wars in the last 10 years, 10, 11 years now, has added $4 trillion worth of debt to our national debt. But just think of, what if we'd have had this $4 trillion in the economy? Just think how much richer this economy would be. And what have we gotten for all these wars? We've gotten nothing but grief. I mean, we're not spreading our Constitution. We're not spreading our goodness. We're spreading a viewpoint of America which I don't think is a good viewpoint of America. A lot of people believe they have a moral obligation, starting with Woodrow Wilson, that we had to prove to the world that we were the most moral and most wise nation, and we had the right and the obligation to force our way and to teach other people. This though doesn't work. Using force to force our goodness on anybody cancels out all the goodness. Country, the freest and the richest, and we have a lot of wonderful traits and wonderful characteristics that we want to. But why don't we concentrate on a free market economy, a sound currency, protection of civil liberties, a sensible foreign policy, and then we could be a nation where other countries would want to emulate us and follow our lead. But unless we change our attitude, and that means the people, about how much we should be involved overseas, it's not going to happen. We're going to work to the bankruptcy. And that's not real far off. So my position is that it should be a lot easier for liberals and conservatives and independents to come together and cut overseas spending and cut these wars. That's what I think would be the easiest thing to cut. Simply means we bring our troops home. Now, the other thing about this is that it's a way to work our way out of it. If we don't work our way out of it and have a dollar collapse, everybody's checks bounce. And then you have political chaos, and then I worry about our civil liberties. But if we do this sensibly and cut the spending overseas, what about all this effort to worry about a border that nobody can identify between Pakistan and Afghanistan? Think of how much fighting and killing we're going over there. Nobody even knows where at all, so we just bomb everybody, you know. But what about our own borders to the south? You know, there's the responsibility of the federal government. We could do that with a lot less resources than worrying about all those overseas borders. And in the last 5 years, it is estimated that 50,000 people have been killed on that border down there. And it involves not only, I think, less so the immigration problem than our failed policy on the drug war. I think. Would have to change our foreign policy and adapt the policy that the founders gave us. And even up until the mid part of the last century, many conservative Republicans endorsed. And that is that we ought to mind our own business. But they'll come up with all these arguments where, oh, there's a civil war going over there and people are getting killed. They have no idea who the good guys and the bad guys are. There's probably bad guys on both sides, but we have to get involved, they say. But how many times did we get involved with the most vicious of dictators? You know, from Stalin to Mao Zedong and all these people. They killed millions, and yet we did business with them. So this whole idea that there's war propaganda going on. War drums are beating. They're ready to go into Syria. We don't need a war in Syria, and we don't need a war in Iran, I'll tell you that. a big economic advantage of this if we decide to work our way out, which is what I'm working to do. And that is, if you cut back, you don't have to cut child health care, or you don't have to cut benefits to the elderly. Some of those programs should never have been started. I'm not going to defend this stuff on constitutional grounds, but on practical grounds, if you want to deal with this and deal in a practical way, let's cut the spending overseas and try to take care of the people that we have taught for 50 years to become dependent on the federal government, and then work our way out. One of the proposals in my bill is to take care of the people who are dependent and need the help. But I would offer the chance, to change the Social Security system, and for instance, to start off with anybody under 25 getting out of college. Let them get out of Social Security. Let them take care of themselves. Wouldn't work unless you do cutting, and that's why we have to change the foreign policy. But the founders were very, very clear on this, and they advised strongly: don't get involved in entangling alliances, don't be the policeman of the world, and don't get involved. But their advice was trade with people and talk to people, and not try to solve all their other problems. But today we do exactly the opposite. I think one of the most foolish examples of putting on sanctions, not at the time, but now, don't you think sanctions on Cuba have been long enough? Other countries are doing business with it. Communism is dead. What I'm worried about is the current system of government interventionism and inflationism and the problems we have today. That's our real... The countries that we do end up trading with, the French and Americans killed 1 million, probably close to 1 million or more. The Vietnamese, we finally left. We lost 60,000, and we lost that war. And they said there would be a domino effect, and communism would spread throughout the world. It didn't happen. China became our banker. Now we do business with the Vietnamese, and just think of what's happened since we left there in the 1973 or so. Since we've left there. Think of what happened with peace, what never happened with war. So why are we so determined, this country, to think that it is necessary? And there's an economic theory behind this, which is a dangerous theory. The claim was that the Depression came because of the gold standard and capitalism. But we didn't get out of the Depression until we had World War II. Now that is foolish thinking, because war never helps your economy. It never helps. Now, the reason of the fallacy is the unemployment rate went down, because everybody was over the 10 million people went overseas fighting. But a lot of people argue with me about my $1 trillion of cut in spending, because they've been taught, the Keynesian teaches, government's supposed to spend more money when you're in trouble. And they said that if you do this, won't this really hurt the economy? But think about it. If you have $1 trillion and you cut it, of course the people are going to get to cut it. But after World War II, 10 million military people came home. We cut the budget by 60%. Taxes went down 30%. That's when the Depression ended. They came back. That's what the Depression. And when we come around to understanding that we do have a responsibility for strong national defense, we have to have a strong national defense, but the founders tried their best to protect us against the king going to war. But unfortunately, the presidents we've had in recent history have acted like kings, have not gotten the permission from you through your congressman voting up and down for a war. And if we did that, we wouldn't have gone to war. And if we had to go to war, we'd fight them, win them, and they would come home. Yeah! The Iraq War was fought, as a consequence or a sequence from 9/11. It had nothing to do with 9/11 because there was no weapons of mass destruction, no Al-Qaeda there. But when they came up with the resolution, I was on the Iraq, on the International Relations Committee, the resolution said not a declaration of war. They said the president can do whatever he wants. Essentially that. If you want to go to war, fine. If you don't have to. And that was how they reneged on the responsibility, which sort of upset me a bit. And so I introduced a substitute resolution and said, okay, I told the committee, I said, look, you guys want to go to war? I don't want to go to war. But I'm offering a resolution of a declaration of war. I said, I'm not going to vote for it, but if you want to go to war, you vote it up and down. Of course, oh, they were furious. Oh, no. And then they did voice vote and voted down. I said, I'm going to make you record the vote that you voted against the declaration of war.
Thank you.
But it was explained to me by the committee chairman of the time that trying to explain to me the Constitution. He said, that part of the Constitution is anachronistic. We don't follow that part of the Constitution. That tells you why we're in trouble today, because the Constitution doesn't mean a whole lot. They ignore it, the courts overrule it, and it's a real mess. We got into this mess by not following it. We could get out of it by sending only people to Washington that will obey the Constitution. The other serious consequence of big government, whether it's for the entitlement welfare system or for the warfare system, because the bigger the government gets, the smaller the people get, the less liberties we have. It's characteristic under a war that civil liberties are compromised. People have sort of accepted this idea, well, under these special emergency conditions, we have to give up a little bit of our liberties. Let me tell you, you don't. You don't have to give up liberties to be safe. Today it is said that we have a perpetual war. It's worldwide, any country, and we're in 130 countries, 900 bases, because we're fighting a war on terrorism. We're fighting the Taliban. The Taliban are people who just want us out of their country. You know, that's what they want. But the war is worldwide. And therefore, we should expect that a continuation of an attack on our civil liberties, much worse than I think it's been in the past. Today, of course, immediately after 9/11, I voted for the support to go after the Al-Qaeda. That is proper, even though I saw our foreign policies being seriously flawed, contributing to that problem. But they attack us, we got to deal with it, we go get them. But we didn't even catch bin Laden for 10 years, and we went and occupied 2 countries, and in a country that had zero to do with it. So but what did they do to the American people? We suffered from the consequence of that. Within 2 weeks, they had a bill on the floor they had been trying to pass for a couple years, and that bill was called the Patriot Act. So that was voted very easily. I was sitting beside a member of Congress on that day, and I saw he was voting for it. I was voting against it. Voting against it, and I said, why?
Thank you. Thank you.
Why are you voting for this bill? I said, you know, it's only been on the floor for an hour. We don't even know exactly what's in it. He said, well, I know that. And I said, you didn't read it? No, I didn't read it. I said, you know there's going to be bad stuff in there. Yeah, I know that. I said, why are you voting for it? He says, how can I go home and tell my people back at home that I voted for the Patriot Act right after 9/11? He said, that would be a difficult thing to explain. I said, but that's your job. Go home and explain it to them.
Yeah.
But almost always, if you look at a bill's name on it coming out of Congress, it's almost inevitable that it's going to do the opposite of what it said. So it was a very unpatriotic bill. If they would have called it the Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, I guess nobody would have voted for it. So next year when we get a chance to repeal this, we won't call it Repeal the Patriot Act. We'll call it Restore the Fourth Amendment Act. Then, of course, the TSA couldn't assume that they have a right to search, seed, and prod us all at the airport and sacrifice all our liberties and humiliate the You know, a year ago, the president announced in this progress against our liberties, he announced that it is a proper procedure for the president of the United States to assassinate American citizens. And to prove his point, he did it. He's done it 3 times already. But the Congress hasn't been much better. The Congress passed a bill. The president signed it on January 1st of this year, the National Defense Authorization Act, which Justin mentioned because he was positively opposed to it, as I was. But this bill literally repeals posse comitatus, keeping the military out of state civil laws. It allows the military to arrest any American citizen if he's associated with any particular group. Just associated. No charges made, no trials. He can be arrested, put in a secret prison, denied an attorney, and kept indefinitely. And that's on the books. We put it on the books. That has to be reversed.
Yeah!
That was pretty bold on what they did, but there was one other provision that fortunately was removed. There was a provision that was in the bill and nearly passed, and it had gone through the House, and it was coming out of the Senate. But when it was on the Senate floor, and the provision said that if you are arrested and you are charged and you have a trial and you're found innocent, they could still keep you indefinitely in a prison. Unfortunately, there was a senator from, I think it was Kentucky, that got that I think you knew about all those problems. I don't think I've given you anything new. But you've given me some more energy because of enthusiasm, because I know you're out there, and there are a lot of people out there, and the numbers are growing by leaps and bounds. The revolution is alive and well, and it's an intellectual revolution, and let me tell you, there are a lot of young people wanting to lead the charge, and that's great for them. There are a lot of others in an older generation that has been rather frustrated over the years, discussing with both parties, and they're being energized by everybody together now. They're realizing that the end stage is getting closer for the system that we have. And that should encourage all of us because it's well grounded, it's sound. There's sound economics and sound constitutional principles, sound moral judgment about what we should do. At least in this crowd, I wouldn't expect anybody to boo me for suggesting that we apply a golden rule to our foreign policy. You know, John Adams said that what we need is a tireless, irate minority. We don't need the majority. You need a minority because that's the way it is all the time because they energize the rest of the people. So it's never what we have today, and even under communism, you don't have 51% voting for this. It's a irate majority, a minority that emphasizes this. But this is what we have today. We have it, and it's growing, and we are influencing other people. We are in transition. I think Justin coming to Congress is representing this. There's going to be a lot more people coming to Congress. And if you look at what's happening across the country, we can't even keep track of it all. I go around the country. This really got moving about 4 years ago, but I meet people who are in office. They're state representatives and local offices. They're all over the place, and this is wonderful. That's how a real revolution occurs. And ultimately, if these ideas are to prevail, they will not be Republican ideas. They have to be pervasive and invade both Democrats, Independents, and Republicans alike, because that is what we're facing today.
Yes.
Nixon said it all when he claimed that the reason why he had to get us off the gold standard and put on wage and price controls, he said, we're all Keynesians now. But someday we have to reverse that. We need the people to say, we all believe in the free market and sound money now.
Yeah.
Nixon said that an idea whose time has come, it cannot be stopped by anything military. The armies can't stop it, governments can't stop it. And I really do believe these ideas whose time has come. And they're not brand new. I didn't invent them. They're not new. It's part of our American tradition. It's part of a tradition that's been going on for many hundreds of years. But these ideas have only been tested in a small manner. But the best test has been here in this country. And then we became the wealthiest and the largest middle class ever. And now, of course, the middle class is shrinking, and we're greatly in debt. We're getting poorer. So our test is going to fade unless we pick up those pieces and refine it. We don't have to go back to anything. We don't have to go back to the 19th century gold standard, because there's a better understanding about gold and money than there ever was. There's better understanding of economic policies, entitlement system. So this is the reason that we put this if we put this together and bring people together, this is going to work. And that is what freedom does. It brings people together. We'll never agree on how we want to use our freedoms, because we'll never agree in a room like this. There might be 50 different religious values and some with no Christian religious values at all. But freedom answers the question, because we don't impose ourselves on other people. Not only in religious values, but economic values. This idea that the government has to take care of us and protect us from ourselves and make sure no single person falls through the crack. The more they try to prevent people from falling through the crack, the more people fall through the cracks. That's what the problem is.
Yeah.
We don't want to tell other people how to spend their money. Does that mean some won't do a good job and they might have problems? That is true. But it will also incite people to do more for themselves. They will have a greater incentive, and there will be a family responsibility, a community responsibility, a more local responsibility. There will be greater wealth in a country. There is no doubt that history shows that the freer a country, the wealthier a country. And we've lost the moral high ground because we give it up to people who say, no, the only way you can spread fairness around the world and around this country is by government force, by forcibly redistributing wealth and regulating. It doesn't work. It leads to the crisis that we have here today. So therefore, we have to have a firmer grasp of how freedom works, how the marketplace works, and why you have to have sound money. And it will change. That's all there is to it. But that's where we're making the great progress. This is why it is so wonderful what is happening. We should be optimistic about it, but not casual about it. We can't say this is going to be easy, because those who are in charge and who have control of the money system and control of the financial system and control of the military and the foreign policy, they will not go away quietly. And yet, this will end because, like I said the other night on TV, they don't accept, the opposition won't accept the moral and the constitution argument. They will not be able to get away from the economic argument, because this can't go on, because we won't have the money to pursue these policies. Franklin once said, those who expect to enjoy the fruits of liberty must, like man, undergo the fatigue of supporting it. So there is some fatigue. I don't like to call it sacrifice, but there is some fatigue, and there is some effort. So in many ways, those of you who would come to a meeting like this have a greater responsibility, because the masses out there will not be understanding the same things that you do. So if you understand this, you have to bear the burden of the responsibility of doing something about it, because it's a greater burden. But if you believe in it, that's what has to happen. And a lot of people come up to you and say, okay, what do you want me to do? And you know, my answer is, do whatever you want to do. place. Some will run for Congress, other offices. Some will support people. Some will make a lot of money, encourage us by donating money. Who knows what people will do? But I think the most important thing that we all do, which I try very hard to do and continue to do, which I learned early on, is try to understand why how you can place these arguments down and compete with the arguments. So it's education. Ultimately, education is the test. But just think of what we have on nightly TV. And I get frustrated because I never get asked questions from an Austrian economic viewpoint. But they haven't been taught it. Most of them don't even have the biggest idea of what they are. So this is the thing. So education is important. Then you say, well, then what I do? Well, I'll tell you what, there'll be something for you, one way or the other. And that is what's so wonderful. And I really do believe it brings people together. It should be a diverse group because everybody's going to use their freedoms in a different way, socially or economically. People should come together. So we should come together to fight for the principle which we can all enjoy in a different manner, and that is enjoying the liberty that we have gotten in a natural, God-given way. I thank you very much for coming.
When the time to give up the fight, start a revolution.